We are here with another Gold Derby Slugfest. My name is Riley Chow. I'm here with Luca Giliberti and Kevin Jacobsen, and we are going to be talking about the big ones, Best Drama Series and Best Comedy Series. I feel like both of these races, we feel like can go one of two ways. In drama series, it seems like it's coming down to Ozark and Succession. In comedy series, it's coming down to The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and Schitt's Creek. Yet it does seem like pretty much everybody is predicting Schitt's Creek and Succession. Kevin, start us off with Best Comedy Series. Do you feel like it's fair that the overwhelming majority of people are going one way?
Sort of, yes. I don't think this is a category that is as open and shut as some people might be expecting, just because, yes, Schitt's Creek obviously got in all four of its main stars, and it had this humongous increase in nominations after last year getting, I think, like 4 and now having 15. I mean, it's obviously had this rising buzz to it year after year once it got onto Netflix. This is the final season, final time to reward it. It's all there's a lot of things in its favor, but when you also have Maisel here, 20 nominations, every pretty much all of the crafts support this show, and it just got bigger and bigger with this third season. And when you compare that with something like Schitt's Creek, which is kind of like a bare bones production in relation to Maisel, then maybe that tips the scales a little bit in that case. But, I'm also looking out for something like Insecure, which certainly had a really big boost in its nominations this year, getting in 2 actors and, getting some below the line support, and also being a story with a Black creator, Black actors, Black-centric story. I think all of that does give it a slight boost that it wouldn't have had in previous years because of 2020. And, it's also on HBO, which I sort of keep going back to, but it's their big push this year. Sorry to Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's also in this category. But when you don't get Larry David in, I don't know if it's really your time per se. But yeah, definitely watching out for Insecure as a potential spoiler here to go down the middle and potentially be an alternative to, I don't know, depending on your perspective, as an alternative to Maisel, as an alternative to Schitt's Creek, who knows?
Yeah, I have it in the exact same order. I have Schitt's Creek winning. I have The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in second, and then I have Insecure in third. I had Maisel winning first I had Schitt's Creek winning at the beginning of phase 1, and I eventually switched back to Maisel because I then realized how many Emmys it had won last year, many of which we were not expecting. It still won 4 acting Emmys. It's still nabbed so many below the line wins. It's still a beloved show. It's in its 3rd season. It's still getting 20 nominations. It's obviously still a force, but I think the passion this year is with Schitt's Creek. It obviously, as Kevin mentioned, blew up in nominations. It got 15. It got all 4 of its, it got its core cast nominated. It got into writing and directing. There's the final season sentiment. We obviously have the Good Place in this race, which could benefit from the same sentiment, but I think the passion is with Schitt's Creek. Would I be surprised if Maisel won? No, but it did miss out in categories like writing for the 2nd year in the row, which is still remains one of the strangest omissions. It missed out for some of its actors. I'm not going to hold it against it, though, because it's still got a buttload of acting nominations. And it's not like Schitt's Creek got in every single actor that it could have gotten in. But, and yes, then there's Insecure, a show that is building, the show that finally broke through after getting that Issa Rae nomination 2 years ago. I think that's a show that can do very well down the line. Even if it doesn't win this year or wins much of anything, I think in the years to come, it'll definitely do very well and be catapulted to the top of the comedy series race, perhaps, or actress race.
Yeah, Schitt's Creek has 15 nominations. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel has 20. I think that the difference with the supposed underperformance of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in the acting categories versus Schitt's Creek is that The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel has achieved, I'd say, peak visibility at the Emmys. I think after a show wins series, then kind of anybody who wasn't watching the show before starts watching it, it seems, at the Emmys, and they're able to just max out in nominations. We saw that with Maisel last year. We saw it previously with Handmaid's Tale, where they just explode, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more passion for the show. It just means that people have seen it, so it's able to get checked off many times when it comes to the nominations. So that Maisel is missing nominations like Jane Lynch, I find more concerning because a show like Schitt's Creek might not be watched by all of the Academy, and that might not matter because it only needs passion. I feel like Schitt's Creek really does have that passion this year. I think it's also a bit concerning for Maisel that, like, I'm not really considering Rachel Brosnahan to win lead actress, and she is the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel herself. Kevin, you mentioned that Schitt's Creek is kind of bare bones. I imagine that it's the lowest budget production that would win this category in some time. It's missing in some
Or
technical.
Fleabag last year,
Yeah.
I don't know how much of a budget that show had, but yeah.
I feel like if they shot Schitt's Creek during the pandemic, nobody would notice because they don't use extras anyway. It's missing in categories like cinematography and sound, and I do kind of wonder if Schitt's Creek can win series while losing just about everything else, just because it's not this highbrow, expensive production. I wouldn't be surprised to see it lose writing to The Good Place, directing, maybe casting and lead actress to Insecure, editing. But I feel like there overall is just such a strong rooting factor for Schitt's Creek. People are really happy to be excited about this show.
Yeah, it is this kind of underdog little show that some people have been watching from the beginning and especially feel an attachment to it now. And there are people who are just finally getting on board now. And there are many people who say that they just binged the entirety of Schitt's Creek in like a month or two, just because they love being in that warm sort of world, which is maybe another factor here that could benefit it. Is just like after the horrific events of this year, that there's something kind of nice and comforting about going to this little world in Canada for a while.
And plus people know that this is the last time and perhaps the only time they can reward it with the comedy series prize. And there have been people who've probably wanted to do it since the very first season, but it didn't even break through until last year. So I think that's another factor that we should consider. I do worry about it a tiny bit just because it is a much smaller show compared to some of the past winners, but we do have Fleabag last year, which you could also consider a smaller show. But I just, again, if you read the temperature in the room, it says Schitt's Creek. And that's ultimately why I'm predicting it.
Yeah, I think we've seen passion really play out at these awards and others a lot more in recent years.
Yes.
And I think we also see at the Emmys this year, we have shows like Westworld and Hollywood and so forth that have tons of nominations, but that doesn't mean that people are going to vote for the show in the series category. I feel like we could see something like that with Maisel, where, people recognize that there are many aspects of the show that are great, but it doesn't mean that it's their favorite show on television. We also have The Kaminsky Method and Dead to Me nominated in this category from Netflix. What We Do in the Shadows did very well. I would watch out for that one at future ceremonies or maybe in categories like production design, editing, writing. Our odds actually have The Good Place in third ahead of Insecure. So I'm wondering how you guys feel about how that show's doing.
Well, it did get in Darcy Carden and William Jackson Harper for the first time this year. So it certainly had its best year of its 4 seasons. So I understand all of that. I don't believe it has won an Emmy yet after 4 seasons. And I do sort of wonder if Schitt's Creek weren't here, if maybe The Good Place would have had that kind of last season embrace as an alternative to Maisel. But yeah, I really kind of feel like it's I'm glad it's nominated. I just feel like Schitt's Creek really sort of stole the final season thunder in many ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think it'll necessarily go home empty-handed. I think there are several categories in which it could win. I think lead actor for Ted Danson is a possibility. Writing is certainly a possibility. Guest actress. You can even make an argument for Darcy Carden in supporting actress. I think if it wins anything, it'll be outside of the series category. Not that that influences its chances in series, but I hope for it that it picks up something. It would be sad to see it conclude its run at the Emmys without a single win. I just, as Kevin said, I think Schitt's Creek stole its thunder, and its nomination haul, as good as it is, it just doesn't necessarily compare to some of the other front runners in this comedy race.
But it's also the only network show in the race. So I don't know if there's still people holding out hope of like the broadcast networks will rise again. And, you know, this is our only way of really rewarding that in any big category. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I think people are a season behind on The Good Place. I feel like the same thing with Schitt's Creek, just because they're always a season behind in terms of coming out on Netflix. I could see The Good Place do something like The Americans in its final season. But I'm just concerned by the total lack of below the line nominations. I don't think it's actually ever been nominated below the line.
Yeah, not even for production design, which should be like such a gimme.
and also Christian Bell in actress. That's, I mean, we're talking about the lead. I mean, the co-lead, but not that that necessarily matters, but it's very difficult to imagine a show winning when it can't get one of its most prominent actors nominated.
Yeah, that is why we dismissed Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yep.
So we'll hop on over to Outstanding Drama Series, where the field is led by Succession, which has 9 nominations out of 18 for its actors. And we also have Ozark with 18 nominations. As I mentioned, you know, everybody's going with Succession, 81% of Gold Derby, actually. Kevin, do you feel like this is a nail biter, or are you pretty set on Succession?
I guess somewhere in between those two things. You know, I feel like it's definitely not a done deal for Succession, and that I do think we could just come out of the Creative Arts Emmys being like, oh, whoops, Succession didn't win anything. What does that mean for the race? But then it ultimately might not matter because the actors just love it so much, as they clearly did with the nominations. I mean, you know, getting things like Nicholas Braun in and Harriet Walter, these are definitely not things that we were predicting. So, yeah, I mean, again, I hate to be a broken record, but it's HBO. It's their big push this year, and they're putting a lot of money and campaigning into that show. It is the successor to Game of Thrones in that regard. That is, you know, their big pony. And yeah, I think that Ozark is a potential real spoiler here, as many people have been predicting since the 3rd season dropped with all of that critical acclaim. And I certainly do think it will have more of that below the line support in many categories, potentially could win something below the line. And then obviously The Crown is always in contention within that top echelon, even if it hasn't actually won drama series yet. I do think perhaps it's time, it's coming soon, perhaps for season 4 or one of the last few seasons, but perhaps not now, even though it does have 13 nominations. But I think it could have done a lot better with the actors. So
I
sort of
I think
a three-way race, as we always have been saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the writing and directing races are the ones that told us that this is very much a 3-horse race. Succession, Ozark, and The Crown, both of them, they got writing and directing nominations. And I think, not to dismiss the other contenders in the drama series race, but I think it's between these 3. I have it in that exact order. The Crown is a show I still consider to be more respected than it is beloved. I don't think it has enough passion, at least yet, to take that drama series prize. And it keeps staying at 13 nominations. It really hasn't increased. And that's not bad per se, but when you're going to win drama series, there needs to be some sort of increase or boost. And I just haven't seen that for The Crown yet. Maybe the fourth season is that it finally does it. Succession blew up. It blew up in the acting categories. I was very hesitant all season long about whether it would do well in the acting categories because it was blanked last year, because it was blanked at SAG twice, but they just nominated 9 different actors. It's obviously got the acting branch support. It's also got support from writers and directors, several below the line people as well. I think it's going to win drama series because it's, again, the temperature of the room. I think it just shocked people with its second season. Its first season got 5 nominations. It wasn't that buzzed about, and then its second season came and just blew everyone's mind. That's why I have it out in front. I don't think it's a slam dunk. I don't think it's a cakewalk for it, like some other people might believe. Ozark is in this race. It underperformed slightly with actors, obviously. It got 3 writing nominations, however, 2 directing nominations. Got so many below the line nominations, including something like makeup. So this is not based on a panel. This is not panel based. This category, and yes, the episode that they're nominated for is where Julia Garner's Ruth Langmore is in a hospital bed and has a bruised up face, but Ozark is not necessarily known for its makeup. And when a show gets nominations like these, it starts to become obvious that people just want to reward it and just want to nominate it, and that can be an indicator. But I think it has a better chance maybe for one of its 2 final installments, but it's in this race.
I talked to the Ozark showrunner. Yeah, they were surprised about the makeup nomination as well. The Crown, I think, it's definitely in third, but I wouldn't say that it's competitive for the win. It's missing from editing and sound mixing again. It only has the 2 acting nominations. I feel like the nominations announcement, what it does for us as predictors is it tells us who has the potential to win. It doesn't necessarily tell us who's going to win, but it can count shows out or say that they have the potential. I look at races like the year that Homeland beat Downton Abbey and Mad Men and everything else that was nominated. And Homeland had the fewest nominations of any of the drama series nominees that year, but it was nominated in all of the key categories. I would say that The Crown wasn't. I think the only 2 that were are Succession and Ozark. I think a lot has been made of the Tom Pelphrey snub for Ozark, but you don't need to be nominated in supporting actor or to get a high-profile supporting actor nominated in order to win a series award. Last year we saw Andrew Scott snubbed for Fleabag. We saw Mandy Patinkin snubbed that year for Homeland. We saw Joseph Fiennes snubbed for the first season of The Handmaid's Tale. Final season of Breaking Bad. Dean Norris missed. Supporting actor is not really a statistic in the same way that a writing nomination is or an editing nomination is. The actors have so many categories, even though they are just one branch. So that kind of opens it up to strange things happening. In terms of nominations, I would say that Ozark actually did better than Succession. I think it's very similar to the race we saw last year with Fleabag and Barry, where Barry was nominated across the board, even got surprise nominations in score, for example, which Ozark has as well. And then Fleabag did not get all the nominations that it could have, but the wind was definitely blowing that way. It had the heat, and it got enough nominations that it was able to come through at the end. So that's why I have Succession right now. I feel like it did step up to the plate and get the nominations that it needed. Having said that, yeah, I do feel that Ozark did better in the nominations since it demonstrated that it has a surplus of support. Going from 0 writing nominations to 3 is huge. I also feel like while Ozark is getting nominated in score and makeup, Succession is not getting nominated in categories like main title design, even though it has that iconic opening. I feel like that's a place where they could have demonstrated that they have, so much support, they're just going to take everything. So I'd be surprised if Succession took everything, given that it has these deficits below the line. It's also not nominated in cinematography, in sound mixing. Now, the winner of, Outstanding Drama Series, Comedy Series, Limited Series, they're not nominated in these categories every year, but about 80% of the time they are, just because at the Emmys, they so often just vote for whatever they like across the board. We've seen shows like Olive Kitteridge win editing, People versus O.J. Simpson win sound mixing, even though they were all just sitting around in the courtroom. We often want to think that the Emmys are voting for specific achievements, and I think that's not necessarily the case.
How dare you?
And and one thing about the acting nominations I would like to mention, specifically for Succession. Obviously, it's 9 nominations. That's impressive. There's no way to it obviously is, but the difference between Ozark and Succession is that Succession's core cast is much bigger than Ozark's. Ozark, obviously, yes, again, it missed out for Janet McTeer and Tom Pelphrey, but I think we can still argue that its core cast was still nominated. Julia Garner, Laura Linney, Jason Bateman. Tom Pelphrey his character wasn't even introduced until the 3rd season. Janet McTeer's was introduced in the 2nd, but she was more of a glorified guest star in the 2nd season. So while Succession obviously blew up, that doesn't mean it has the unequivocal support from the actors branch, or it doesn't mean it's going to win all of its acting categories just because it's nominated 9 times. Game of Thrones was nominated 10 times last year, and it picked up 1 acting Emmy. The Handmaid's Tale in its 2nd season was nominated 8 times in acting. It picked up 1 Emmy. And it didn't win drama series. So I think it's very important to recognize that even though these shows have support from individual branches, significant support, that doesn't mean these branches necessarily are voting for it in series. I think series much more depends on which show has that overall support, which one has that buzz, that passion, that what does the temperature in the room say again? And I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. We can look at categories like editing, where Succession is nominated twice, Ozark is nominated twice. If one of those wins, that might be an indicator. Same with directing. If Ozark wins or Succession wins there, again, that could be an indicator. But at the end of the day, the drama series prize might be completely different. We saw it with Game of Thrones the last 2 times, or the two times it won in 2017, 2018. It won with Peter Dinklage above the line, and that's it. So I think, yes, these other categories are important, but again, it's not the be all and end all of it.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because you have shows like When They See Us or Downton Abbey that are just able to get tons of acting nominations. And, you say maybe the actors aren't going for it, but, maybe they are. Maybe actors are just, so in love with these shows, but the actors branch is just one branch. It's about 10% of the Academy. Looking below the line, I feel like they favor Ozark over Succession. I think it's also tricky to judge because we don't know if the Emmys are going to go more populist or if they're going to line up more with the critics. And they can absolutely do both at the exact same time. Last year, we saw Fleabag win, which was the most acclaimed comedy season of the decade. And we also saw Game of Thrones win for its final season, probably the worst reviewed season ever to win Outstanding Drama Series. So we got those both in the same year. Somehow voters, favored both of these shows. So are they going to go for this massive audience hit that is Ozark that didn't get any nominations from the Television Critics Association? Or are they going to go with Succession, which is more of a critic show?
Or are they going to go with The Mandalorian, which has Baby Yoda?
Yeah.
Which,
And
by the way,
15
that show, I mean, it gets 15 nominations, obviously all of that below the line support. I know that it doesn't have anything else for like the main telecast that it's nominated for, not even like directing. But, you know, a lot of people watched it. That's why I have
Yeah.
it not last.
It has 3 editing nominations.
Over the
Exactly.
crown. Yeah.
It completely blew up.
With a
There's
guest nomination too.
yeah,
Voice
I,
acting.
I'm
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sort of shocked it didn't break into the directing race, because looking at it in hindsight, it would make a lot of sense. But that's a show that's returning in the fall now, so it's definitely eligible for next year. So we need to be looking out for that one, at least next year.
I do think that it'll lead all dramas in terms of wins. I have it picking up 6 awards in those half-hour categories and, you know, visual effects, that kind of thing. But yeah, basically in conclusion, I'm just waiting for the creative arts to tell me what to do here. Last year with Barry versus Fleabag, which I mentioned, you know, Barry did better in nominations, and then at the creative arts, Fleabag won casting and editing. I thought, okay, well, it's obviously Fleabag then. So hopefully we get some kind of outcome like that at the creative arts this year, which will make our jobs very easy.